Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Monday, August 24th, 2020. Good morning. How's it going? Too much to think about today for me, even to get the date right. Thankfully, we'll have Greg Dworkin taking his shot at rounding everything up. I don't think anybody could round up all of the things that captured our interest, let's say, over the weekend. And, of course, still make room for a preview of what's billed as the Republican National Convention happening later this week. Beginning tonight, I guess. And it's a bit of an unusual convention. A lot of talk about how it would be structured over the weekend. And that was not discussion about what people were discovering about what was scheduled, but rather discussion among the actual organizers trying to figure out what they were going to do for the rest of the week. It's Dems in disarray, as usual. Of course, the Republicans are the ones in disarray, but that doesn't work in a headline. So the Dems are the ones in disarray. They all Democrats disagree about what exactly the Republican convention will be able to put together and how it will come off. Some say it will be a disaster. Others say it will be a debacle. Disarray. And, so far, the indications are, and I think they're still sort of, who knows? They may yet foil these reports, but word has been leaked, I guess, to news organizations. I don't think we've seen anything official about it yet, but reputable news organizations, if there are such things still in existence, now say that Trump plans to grab for himself a speaking slot in primetime, the 10 o'clock hour. I don't know if he's going to use the whole hour or what, but he does frequently go on for an hour or two at a time when he's speaking extemporaneously, as he has been doing with the coronavirus briefings. He's going to take the 10 o'clock hour every single night, which is a bit of an unusual thing. Now, usually the conventions, they're all about the candidate, but it's all about having other people praise the candidate. They want America to see how many other people love Donald Trump, not just how much Donald Trump loves Donald Trump. But this is the particular kink or whatever of the Republican Party at the moment. They are into Trumpophilia, and so is he. So they're on the same page. So that's the idea. I believe the word was that he wanted all 4 nights because he had so much to say. He needed to rebut the Democratic convention, which, is always sort of an unwritten goal, I guess, of the Republican convention, but never this explicit, never in the hands of the candidate every single time, every single night. Remember, ordinarily, again, there are, just as there were for the Democrats, hundreds of Republicans clamoring for a bit of the spotlight, and it's a very precious commodity. For the candidate to take all 4 nights is unusual, to say the least. It does no favors for Republicans looking to get a bit of time in the spotlight. That's 3 speaking slots, major speaking slots. I imagine he won't be limiting himself to 5, 10, 15 even minutes in any of these cases. It may be totally unscheduled. He may just throw the schedule off entirely by just refusing to leave the stage and backing people up. I really don't know what he's going to do with this time, and neither does he. So the convention planners must just be going crazy. This year, it may be the case that there are plenty of Republicans who are grateful not to be thrust into the spotlight at Trump's convention. I mean, it's bad publicity, and if you're a race, all politics being local, if Trump isn't the most popular thing in your district, it might be best for you if you not appear. I understood for the longest time that Mitch McConnell was looking to weasel out of appearing at the convention at all, saying he was going to be traveling around Kentucky during that time and just wouldn't be able to. Gosh, I'm busy at that moment. I just can't make it. Even in the age of the virtual convention, I'm just too busy. but he showed up on the speakers list that was announced a couple of hours ago. Over the weekend, they fleshed things out. The first word out of the Republican Party headquarters was that they had, I believe, 12 key speakers lined up, 6 of whom were Trump's, which was really interesting. And, all the Bidens, there was plenty of Bidens who had a role, spoke at some, in some capacity at the convention, but it was most of them, it was about introducing Joe that night that he was going to give his speech. Even Jill Biden's speech was just basically kind of a run-up to this. But, okay, plenty of family members get involved. This made it look like each of them would be getting, a major slot. I don't know if they're all getting an hour or anything, but Ivanka was going to speak, of course. But Don Jr. and Eric Trump, who are, of course, firewalled off from the politics because they're running the business, we're each going to get a slot, too. I don't know whether they're going to speak together, separately. I don't know. Lara Trump wasn't even on the list, but she's getting a spot. She's Eric's wife. Not one of the 6. So let's see. It was Don and Eric and Ivanka. Of course, Tiffany getting her own slot as well. Melania, which is to be expected as the first lady, would be getting a slot. That's 5. Then the 6th was Donald Trump. But on the expanded lists, which came out, and now sort of drafting people, I would not be surprised at all if a lot of those people weren't 100% sure that they were getting a speaking slot, and it might be a surprise to them. And many of them probably weren't even seeking a speaking slot, and they got drafted. Donald Trump just doesn't really know or trust, anyway, that many people, which is an extraordinary thing for somebody who's been a glad-handing businessman for all of his life, except he's a backstabbing businessman rather than a glad-handing businessman. You know what I didn't do? I didn't run the Skype test, so I'm hopeful that everything will work out. And when Greg calls in, the drill, Greg. If I don't pick up, I'll call you in a minute. It just occurred to me that I didn't have the time to do that today. Anyway, didn't mean to get distracted from things. I was hoping that this would be the case. Excellent. The reason I mentioned that I hadn't done the Skype test, like none of you really care about that, I was looking to shame Skype into working by mentioning it on the air that it was a trouble spot and how much they had sucked lately. So it worked, and the rings came through, and Greg Dworkin is here. So great. Good job. You're off the hook, Skype. I understand Zoom is down worldwide, so we should be grateful we even have Skype. So,
day off.
Yeah. Right. And it's a good day.
It's a snow day.
This is what it's going to be like. It just hit me as you said that. There's going to be no snow days for the virtual schoolers this year.
Oh, sure there will. There'll be the days that Skype goes down.
Yeah, I guess so. Right. Or there'll be a lot of kids learning how to hack things as they try to get out of their tests or whatever.
Right. So we got a whole bunch to talk about. We're going to do the Trump convention, I guess, later. The convention that is basically enough about me. What do you think about me convention?
Yes, right.
Right. We'll do that.
Okay.
But, look, we have the Conways, the Falwells, Jared and Eric Prince and the Seychelles, and an exploding ventilator or two as part of that story.
Right,
we have the U.S. Postal Service and the hearings that are happening today. We have the RNC fealty to Trump in that they don't even have a platform. They just say whatever he says we're good with, which, by the way, has been true the entire 3.5 years. Lower taxes, we'll do the policy. You just stand up there and pretend you're head of the party.
By
it's
which
a deal between both of us. We have Steve Bannon's wall.
Right.
And we have Mary Trump's talking about the family, all thinking that Donald's jerk and really unqualified for anything. We have the undoing of the Rose Garden.
Yeah.
We have pandemics. We have schools opening and closing. We have sports issues. We have a couple of hurricanes and a wildfire or two.
Yes.
So this is all chaos. And then the Republican National Convention's happening right in the middle of the chaos, and it's like only Monday morning.
Yes. And before we get too far along, I guess I'll mention also another outrageous police shooting inflaming tensions once again yesterday from, was it Kenosha?
Mm-hmm.
So we got it all, to say the least.
Right. So there's a story in Politico, The Grand Old Meltdown, what happens when a party gives up on ideas. And this one quote from it that I thought was interesting. Even as they attempt to distract from the wreckage, redirecting voters' gaze toward those dastardly democratic socialists and reminding them of the binary choice before them. These Republicans rue their predicament but see no way out of it. Like riders on a derailing roller coaster, they brace for a crash but dare not get off.
Okay. Riders on a derailing roller coaster. Riders on a derailing roller coaster. Doesn't really fit the song, but...
Yeah. But, part of the problem is, like, they know they're in trouble, but they can't do anything about it because what's the alternative?
Jumping off of a derailing roller coaster, I guess.
Well, that's, going to hurt you. And so they are not going to do it. And if you stay where you are, it's going to hurt you. But at least, it's not like I didn't deliberately try to hurt it just happened to me, So
that's true.
Maybe that's better. And maybe somehow or other I'll walk away from the crash. These things happen. Whereas if I jump off, I know.
Yeah. The guy who writes it, he says it like there's an alternative. They're not, you know what? They're not getting off the derailing roller coaster. Yeah.
Well,
they're strapped in. And
reasons for that.
I mean, it's bad. I get that.
Right. It's Max Boot had a tweet. He said it would never occur to Trump to denounce his fans, no matter how nutty, like the QAnon people. Mm-hmm. And the flip side is it doesn't matter how good people are, like John McCain or John Lewis. If that person disrespects Trump, that's the only thing that matters.
Yes.
And, I read that and I thought, there's just too many people that simply cannot accept that Trump is really this horrible. So they dismiss it. They make excuses. They claim it is old news. I don't believe it. You're exaggerating. It's Democratic partisanship. They otherwise change the topic. He really is that bad, and he really did these things. And some things break through. Some things do not break through. Just as an example, CBS poll over the weekend, number of U.S. deaths from coronavirus has been, according to National Registered Voters, acceptable or not acceptable.
Oh, yeah. So,
right? Republicans find 176,000 plus deaths acceptable.
Right. Well, I know that that's okay because that's fiction. The number is 180,000. Ha! Busted.
Right. Now, I honed in on the fact that 43% of Republicans say it's not acceptable, and I'll gladly accept their vote. But it's an amazing number. With Democrats, it's 1090, and with Independents, it's 3367. That allows for some misinterpretation of what do you mean acceptable. Clearly it's not acceptable. But what if you meant that it is what it is, and now we have to just do the right thing from this point onward?
Oh, well, all right. The first part I've heard before. The do the right thing part I am waiting to hear.
You never know. You don't know how people interpret this thing, but it's a pretty remarkable number.
Yes. All of the numbers involved, including the number of people we've lost.
Yeah, exactly. So, we have that. We should probably just finish off with, because I was on the show last Thursday morning, and then Thursday night was Joe Biden's very, very good speech.
Yes.
And then the wrap-up of the Democratic National Convention, Biden and Harris were both on ABC last night with David Muir.
Yes.
Muir.
Okay.
Who interviewed them, and as Soledad O'Brien said, why do the anchors always ask the same questions so that they can have their network show the same question with the same answer on their network with them asking,
Yes.
And it's not exactly compelling video, but they did fine, and they're clearly getting along. And their whole shtick at this particular point in time is, look, we're normal people just trying to do a job. We'll do the best we can, but we have you in mind, as opposed to the Republicans who have Donald Trump in mind and nobody else, which is exactly what their convention shows, because like half the lineup is Trump's.
Okay.
Not Mary Trump and not Donald's sister, who doesn't think very much of him, but the other Trumps who want, part of the empire.
I learned there's another sister.
Falls, except I don't know how that works when, you're in prison.
Well, I was going to say Zoom, but no, I guess not. Not even that.
I'm not sure Don Jr.'s off the hook, but Donald Sr. Is certainly going to be, having some issues. And that's all because the political reporters, who can only see what they see and can't see beyond their own area, are talking about the secession fights within the family. Is it Ivanka versus Don Jr.? Is it Don Jr. versus Don Sr.? With the Trumps, it's always the son versus the father. It's always that. It was Donald Sr. versus Fred. It was, all of that tied into dynasty. But just like when political commentators look at what's going to happen in November and can't see the pandemic because it's their blind spot, people looking at what happens to the Trumps after the election, should they lose, forget about the fact that there's a lot of legal issues that may, play into who wins and who loses,
yes,
and who loses bigger.
Yeah, and a good point.
But we can't do that, because we have to talk about it as if everything's normal, because otherwise that would imply that there's legal issues now, because that would, we can't do that. That's not fair.
No. People aren't ready, I guess. I don't know. Well,
you've suggested he be hung for treason, so.
Yes. I have wondered why other people have not done that. I'm just saying, if you want to hold him accountable,
I don't understand why you can't suggest that the guy should be held accountable.
Oh, I suggest that.
You happen to have one of the, more colorful ways that he could be held accountable, but the point is still the same.
It's histories.
Right? People who are doing the analysis just refuse to suggest that Trump should be held accountable for what he's done.
Yes. Maybe it's because they want to expand the circle of accountability so wide. I'd like to include, say, Jared Kushner, who is forcing his way into that.
Yeah, there were some amazing stories there. The one that obviously caught everybody's eye has to do with the 2016-ish, I don't remember even anymore exactly when it was from, meeting with the Eric Prince and Russian conduit in the Seychelles.
Early 2017, January, I think.
Yeah. Where a back-channel Russian conduit was set up.
Yeah, a spy dude.
But, here's how that works. Aaron Banko, writing in the Daily Beast, revealed Jared Kushner's private channel with Putin's money man.
So private. So very private. Yes.
More than a dozen Trump administration officials, current and former, describe a clandestine relationship between Kushner and the CEO of a Kremlin sovereign wealth fund. Mm-hmm. And then the story goes on to say, in an effort to supply New York City hospitals with the medical equipment they needed, Kushner looked in multiple places for the equipment and found a safe bet in Moscow.
Safe.
While the State Department, the Ohio State University, while the State Department yes. had been involved in the logistics of the onboarding and offloading, it was Kushner who helped strike the deal. The ventilators turned out to be faulty and were cast aside by officials in New York and New Jersey, according to local officials. During that same period, the city of Los Angeles was told by representatives of the federal government it had lost a bid for N95 masks to a Russian entity, according to two people familiar with the matter. The LA officials were never told the Russian outfit's name. Kushner held the details of the New York shipment closely and accelerated the order by leaning on his personal relationship with Dmitriev, a confidant of President Putin who'd been dispatched to make inroads with the inexperienced 2016 Trump transition team.
The spy dude.
Those ventilators went on to blow up. They weren't just faulty.
Yes, right.
They blew up and caught fire.
I was going to say, that's an awful fault that has.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's Jared's managing of the pandemic right there in a nutshell.
Yeah, pretty good. Yeah, I remember that story, and that was just, that was the eye-grabbing headline that I saw tweeted around by Noah Shachtman, I think. But there was plenty of other stuff in that story. In fact, that was a minor point in the story.
Executive editor, I think, which is why he was sending it around.
So, it was interesting. I went and read it. Yes, exploding ventilators, I remember, from March or April, I guess, when we found that out. Also, as they came over, it was a big to-do about it. The Russians were trying to play it up as we're bailing the United States out of this terrible pandemic, and Trump didn't really want to be bailed out of anything that he thought was still a hoax anyway. But, these things were faulty, and they had blown up and caused fires in the ICUs in Russian hospitals. And also, how European
they're consistent,
is.
when you run oxygen through these things, you sort of have to be careful there's no sparks, for example.
Right. Yes, you don't want those, and that's what they were getting.
Or maybe, Russian ventilators were built so that you could also drink vodka and smoke while you're on them. I don't know.
That's probably a good idea. It's one lung gets vodka and a cigarette, and the other one, or maybe one lung gets the vodka and the other gets a cigarette.
Well, don't tell Trump he'll want to put vodka in your lungs.
His vodka. Trump vodka.
Then there's the FDA. So I hope people appreciate and understand what was wrong with Trump's FDA comments yesterday.
He made them. I know that.
He made them. That's the problem.
Wrong.
So you have the FDA, which is supposed to be a neutral agency.
Yes, right.
The FDA is supposed to conduct studies of whether stuff works or not, or at least demand information from companies running the studies so that they can evaluate whether something's safe to go to market. That's what they do.
Strongly safe, yes. All right.
Okay. And there was a lot of pressure on, remember the D in FDA is drug. So the Food and Drug Administration was under a great deal of pressure to authorize hydrochloroquine because Trump said it was a miracle cure, and some guy probably bought tons of it and wanted to make money on it, so told Trump it was a good idea. And Trump, with Jared, decided politically it was more important to pretend that you're taking care of the pandemic than to actually take care of the pandemic because that was beyond their capability.
Yeah.
So they had to make lots of noise that they had miracle cures. Now, that's what they do. They're good at that. They sell Trump University and Trump steaks.
Yeah.
So I don't understand anything about pandemic and science and all that stuff.
Wow.
But I do know selling stuff. So I'm going to sell you on this miracle cure, and that's going to be our policy. And my father-in-law will be comfortable with it, said Jared, because that's what he does.
Sure.
And all of that was true. And so he tried to sell people. It turns out hydrochloroquine didn't work, but he put incredible amounts of pressure on the FDA to approve it. So they had what they call emergency authorization use.
Yeah.
We'll let you use it. You don't have to do all those studies. Once you do that, it means nobody's going to do the studies.
Oh, I guess
so
do your homework.
Other countries were running it because they're not FDA.
Yeah.
They're not America. And so we found out from studies already going on, plus other countries, that, this stuff doesn't work. But by doing this emergency authorization, you short circuit the whole process of finding out whether or not this is an effective therapy. And in the middle of a pandemic, you've got clinicians who want to do whatever sounds good or somebody said, or I read on the internet that one of my friends tried this and it seemed to work. And it's totally understandable.
Yeah.
And you have the academicians, and the epidemiologists who are saying, wait a minute, you got to do the studies. Otherwise, you don't really know what works and what doesn't work, because medicine is fraught with things that we thought worked and turned out it didn't. So we need to know to do the studies. Well, we can't do the studies because we got all these people dying. Yeah, but you need to do the studies. Otherwise, you're not going to know what's going on. All right, we'll compromise. We'll give them the medicine, and then we'll write up what we saw.
Yeah.
And so you get a whole bunch of conflicting things that don't really answer the question. And that allows Trump to say, see, I told you hydrochloroquine still might work. You just got to add zinc. Or you just got to add vitamin D. Or you got to add oleander. Or you got, whatever. Yeah. That's what happens when you don't have the information. So it's a really big deal to do this emergency authorization use and then basically for practical purposes end the studies. Now you have patients who said, I heard about it on the news. Why should I agree to be on the placebo arm or the randomized? I might have a placebo when I know what I really want is I want this drug.
Yeah, you can just sneak it to me and no one's any the wiser. And all you have to do is write down that you gave it to me. So why not do it? Not so good. And this is is this it's the second emergency authorization that, I don't know, that's come up. So they got one for hydroxychloroquine.
Because they're talking about doing it with, testing of various sorts. But in terms of drugs, because Trump has pushed them, the first big fiasco was hydrochloroquine. And apparently we couldn't learn from that because now we have this new one, which is really not so new, something called convalescent plasma, which we've been doing for a long time, or plasma, as Trump pronounced it.
Oh, okay.
So,
European.
The idea is if you've been sick, you take the blood of folks who have already gotten over the illness, and hopefully there's some antibodies, another special sauce in there that we don't know about, that if you give it to somebody else, maybe it'll help them.
Yes.
And it sounds like a good idea, and it's unclear whether it works. As Craig Spencer, remember Craig Spencer, the guy who was doing Ebola fighting in Africa, came home, got Ebola but didn't know it yet, took the L train and went bowling in Brooklyn. You remember that guy?
Yeah, I do.
He's a frontline ER guy in New York City who's also been very vocal about what we need to do on the pandemic, including wearing masks. He's a good guy. And he said, look, folks, when I got Ebola, they gave me convalescent serum from Ebola. It made me sick. It didn't help me. It doesn't work on everything. We don't know. You have to do the studies. And so now Trump says, okay, well, let's do this emergency authorization. Instead of doing the studies, let's just say it's going to be available. This convalescent plasma may or may not work. It's only available for people in the hospital who are very sick. It's not available in large supply. It's hardly a miracle drug for all of that. And by the way, by doing this against the advice of the FDA, who decided not to do it last week because there wasn't enough information to justify it, you've now made it almost impossible to actually study it. So just like with hydrochloroquine, now we have another potential therapy which may have marginal effects, which may have some beneficial effects if we can identify the proper people and the proper timing.
Proper people. Yeah.
You know, in other words, might be the very sick, but you have to do it within the first day of hitting the ICU, whatever the parameters are. Now you can't study it because Trump has made it so that nobody wants to volunteer for the study, and nobody's going to do the study, and people might even argue it's unethical to do the study. How can you study and put somebody on a placebo when this emergency authorization medicine is available and you're sick?
Too. Yeah, and you gave me somebody else.
It's horrible. People are really upset about it, and it's going to be just like Noah and the Sharpie. You know, when they tried to subvert an agency, and people within the agency were really upset, but we didn't find out until we had a Freedom of Information Act and got the emails about it.
Yeah, all right. That took me a little time to untangle. Noah and the Ark? No. The Sharpie. All right, that's a new one. I hadn't heard that one. It's an oldie, of course, and we'll be right back with more craziness after this. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Greg Dorgan still with us, and describing, I think you actually did have some honest to God calamari last night. You didn't go to Rhode Island?
I did. It was Sunday night, and we have a lovely Italian restaurant that home delivers, and I just I've been dying for calamari all weekend.
Ever since, right? Okay, so that worked out very well. Good ad for Rhode Island. Well done.
Yeah, I'm going to call that guy and tell him not to come for me.
All right, he does look like the kind of guy who would kick your door down if he found out. I don't know if I can get out of it by just saying I don't eat anybody's calamari, but
anyway, there is a Contact FDA website. So if you're unhappy with politics influencing and ruining the FDA, you can call them and let your know. You can call 1-888-INFO-FDA. 1-888-INFO-FDA. Let them know.
Okay.
It's important that they hear from you because it's bad. And so this is not a miracle cure. And however Trump sells it, it's Trump selling it. And, nobody's going to believe him. And why does that matter? Because we have vaccine coming. And that really does matter. Because it's entirely possible that what we see with hydrochloroquine and what we see with convalescent plasma will, one of them, not working, hydrochloroquine, one of them marginally working, but taken before its time.
Oh, okay.
Not allowed to ripen like a fine wine. So we don't know. But if he does that with vaccines and rushes a vaccine before safety results are known or ready and orders the FDA to do an emergency use authorization and gets it out too early, he's already got the QAnon anti-vax people refusing to do it. Then he'll have the other half of the public refusing to do it because nobody believes him.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important that you not do this with organizations like the FDA or the National Weather Service, so that if you get a hurricane coming, let's say, toward Louisiana, today or another one on Thursday, bookending the Republican National Convention, I might add, you believe them. Otherwise, it's why should I believe them? Trump told me not to.
It's a hoax. Don't go anywhere. We don't need to evacuate. Yeah.
By the way, I learned a very important thing, and that is in Texas, when you do hurricane prep.
Yeah.
Because all of the TV stations were broadcasting this. You need water, you need milk eggs and bread, and you need brisket.
Okay.
Right? Because you can only get 2 brisket per family. So don't try to get more than you are entitled to.
Right.
We're limited because this is an emergency, which makes total sense. I mean, assuming you have the electricity, brisket can feed people for a long time, a big family for a long time.
Yes.
So, let's just hope everything works out for them. But I'm not confident right now in having all the money from FEMA taken to try to shore up Trump's non-plan for unemployment. And I just hope that it's not too bad. But, as Donald Trump says, it is what it is. So we'll have to see.
Right. Yeah, that's all you have to say. I think we should probably also point out that, 2 hurricanes coming, wildfires, etc., and Trump's so-called executive order, purported executive order from the other day. I don't know if it ever went into effect, but the aim of it was essentially to drain FEMA of all its remaining funds. So, good timing.
Right. And since we mentioned them at the top of the show, just to flesh out a little bit, the Conway story is that Kellyanne is stepping out of the White House. George is stepping away from the Lincoln Project. They're going to concentrate on their family. They're having some issues.
Whatever.
I'll just leave it at that. The Falwell thing is that Jerry Falwell announced that his wife, in fact, did have an affair with the pool boy.
Yeah.
He didn't talk about his own affair potential with the pool boy.
Right.
But everybody thought that since he gave that interview to the Washington Examiner, to Paul Bedard, the whisperer, self-styled, that the story must be a whole lot worse than this. Otherwise, they wouldn't be getting it out to a friendly outlet. So we'll see what happens. with that. So for those who missed it, that's what's going on there.
Best comment I saw on that one, of course. I have to read this one out. Daniel Dresner, who you may see from time to time in the Washington Post, but says. Jerry Falwell confirms rumors that his wife, Becky, had an affair with the pool boy. And he says, "Oh, honey, bless your heart, but that's not the rumor." So, well summarized there. Okay, moving on.
So let's talk about some effects of the Democratic National Convention. We can't talk about what hasn't happened yet with any confidence.
What the hell?
With the Republicans. But from the Democrats, 122 plus million people watched the Democratic Convention live across broadcast, cable, and digital platforms, according to TJ Ducklow with the campaign. We had 128.7 million videos on social. More than 1.1 million texted vote to 30330. And we raised $70 million. So it was a good 4 days for Joe Biden in America, he says. Now, Axios covers this, and I want to cover it because there's been a lot of confusion about that.
All right.
Viewership of the Democratic National Convention was down about 17% on average this year across all 4 nights compared to 2016 when you use Nielsen as your metric. Nielsen looks at broadcast and cable.
Right.
It doesn't look at streaming. So viewership was down about 70% on average, but about average for Biden's big speech at the end, which is really the part that matters. What they didn't do is they didn't measure streaming. It's hard to find what was streaming in 2016. Maybe there wasn't any. I don't know. But it was 10 million this time.
Okay.
So if you had, let's say, averaging 18 million for the first 3 nights plus 10 million, you get about 28. 18 million on the networks and 10 million streaming, and 28 is about what the networks got back in 2016. So is it apples to apples, apples to oranges? Nobody really knows. Enough people saw it that they gave a whole bunch of money, and Biden's favorables went up. So whether they saw it or whether they read about it the next day really doesn't matter. But if you're trying to track this thing, that's why you get so many different, well, the viewership was down. Well, it really wasn't. That, just so you know.
Okay. I can believe it. Yeah, I mean, streaming would have been much more important this year. I mean, it grows every year, I assume.
Compared to 1988, we streamed a whole lot more.
Well, yeah, that's obviously true. But I think the virtual circumstances, I think a lot of people probably did initially just tune in streaming anyway, and maybe for the big major speeches. And, you know, a lot of times, you know, the television coverage only begins with the major speeches.
Also, anyway, keep in mind, Fox News didn't air the convention in full the way MSNBC did.
Okay. Well, that's,
you know, I mean, there's a whole bunch of things that go into those Nielsen ratings, but that may not tell you the big picture. That's what I'm trying to say. And so then you go back and look at the polls. You may recall, I talked a lot about the fact that I didn't really expect a huge bounce, and from the conventions because everybody's kind of locked in.
Yeah.
Well, there wasn't really a big bounce from the convention in regard to the head-to-heads in the polls, the few polls that have been done so far. Maybe there'll be more today, where Biden was running a 10-point lead. He's running a 10-point lead. But ABC, for example, Biden enjoys post-convention bump in favorability. Nate Cohn noted over the weekend, you may not see any bounce at all in the head-to-heads, but you might see it in favorability for Biden and job approval for Trump. So Biden's favorability ticked up from 40% just over a week ago to 45%, so he got a little bit of a favorability bounce there. Prior to the convention, Biden had a net negative, with slightly more Americans having an unfavorable view of the former vice president than favorable. And in the days after the convention, Biden's favorability went up to 45 in the new poll, and President Trump's favorability currently stands at 32. Not that changed from the last poll, but his unfavorability reached 60. That's not job approval, that's favorability.
Okay.
People do not like Trump, and they do like Biden, and that is, again, keep in mind, the important thing is Biden is ahead, and Trump is the incumbent. So if you keep your 10-point lead, that's fine. Now Trump has to have a convention where he's going to make that 10-point lead smaller. That's his job. So we'll see how that goes. So what I'm saying is look for favorability changes, not so much head-to-head changes, because people are sort of locked in. This one from Morning Consult, Biden gets no immediate convention bounce, but still leads. In a post-convention poll, Biden led by 9 among likely voters, and he led by 8 last week. And 51% of likely voters said they had a favorable view on Biden on Friday, a single-day record in the Morning Consult tracking of the poll. There's other polls out there that basically say, okay, I was going to vote against Trump, now I'm more voting for Biden, but they really haven't changed their vote numbers. That's where you see the shifts. You don't really see them in the head-to-head. Everybody's locked in, as I said. So that'll just give you an idea of what to look for next week. And I think I said to you last week, Jason Miller is the only sensible advisor for Trump on this, because he told the media that the Democrats are going to get a 10-point bounce out of this, whereas everybody else on the Republican side said, no, there's not going to be a bounce. And there isn't going to be a bounce. And the reason Jason Miller said that is that now this week he can turn around and say, I was expecting a 10-point bounce and it was really nothing. They fell. But in fact, that's
the usual play.
Garbage.
Oh, well, yeah, the usual play
it's
is
the
garbage.
Usual play, but it's
true.
garbage.
Yeah, okay, good point. Fair enough. It is garbage. What you usually have reported to you is garbage.
Right.
Yeah, you're right.
Anyway, so just keep that in mind when you listen to a lot of the analysis.
I will do that. Do you have any more analysis I can keep it in mind for?
Sure. Well, we have 7 analysis.
Let's see.
Okay, listen, Sarah Binder.
We
love Sarah Binder, right?
Though. Yes.
Endangered House GOP want the mail delivered. So the marginal GOP in Democratic-leaning districts broke with GOP leaders to support the U.S. Postal Service. Don't forget, we had a vote on this over the weekend.
Right.
So let me give you the image. There's actually a tweet that she said this in, but here's the image so you could see it. It's pretty clear.
All right.
If your district leans Democrat and you are a Republican, you're more likely to vote with the post office. I think 26 of them did.
Yeah, okay, I see it.
And if you're like a solid Mark Meadows district style Republican, then you're going to vote no.
If you can get away with anything, regardless of what your constituents truly want, you'll stick with the party.
Right. So I thought that was kind of important.
Okay.
Jack Jenkins, writing for the Religious News Service, a liberal guy, by the way. Joe Biden's acceptance speech caps off an unusually faith-based Democratic National Convention. For years, pundits and political analysts have accused Democrats of having a God problem, insisting the party doesn't do enough to highlight the role religion plays in the lives of millions of Americans. The accuracy of the critique remains a matter of dispute, but few, if any, politicos made that claim Thursday as former vice president closed out this year's atypical and atypically religious Democratic National Convention. I found the best way through pain and loss and grief is to find purpose. As God's children, each of us have a purpose in our lives, said Biden, a lifelong Catholic. And we have a great purpose as a nation to open the doors of opportunity to all Americans, to save our democracy, to be a light in the world once again. It was a perhaps small appeal to his Christian faith, one of only a few scattered throughout the closing speech, but while Biden's faith mentions were uncharacteristically minimal, the convention itself was unusually spiritual. Then I think they showed that dialogue he had with a Protestant minister, a black minister, prominently over the deaths of, I think it was Mother Emanuel, parishioners, and talked about how faith and Kierkegaard and other things, really guide him in terms of how to approach this. And Jenkins goes on to say the noticeable focus on faith, though frequently offset by appeals to religiously unaffiliated voters who make up an ever-increasing percentage of the party, was tied to the ongoing coronavirus pandemic and oriented partly to moderates and even conservatives who Democrats hope will abandon President Trump on Election Day. So he correctly points out the Pledge of Allegiance said one nation under God, each of 4 nights at the Democratic National Convention, even though Trump then spent the next couple of days tweeting they're trying to take God out of everything.
Sure.
And, of course, Trump said that on a Sunday while he was golfing.
Yes.
So,
Happy
to me,
Sunday,
he was just
God.
invoking the Lord's name in vain every time he hit something into a sand trap is what he was doing.
That could have been it.
It's about God. We need God. God, damn it. That's Trump.
I have to, again, I want to, I ordinarily I would say I want to caution people, but I don't want to caution Donald Trump on this. The golf course, I mean, if you're like a Caddyshack fan, bad place to, flirt with, whatever, with invoking the name of God for no particular reason, let's say. I mean, to me, it was an invitation to be struck by lightning. Didn't happen, but he'll go next weekend too, so just wait.
Right. Harry Anton writes, Trump is leading Republicans to an unwanted record in the popular vote. American elections tend to swing on a pendulum. No one party usually holds power for too long. Since 1952, for example, only once has a party won the presidency 3 elections in a row. Mm-hmm. Okay, we almost did in 2016, but then Comey and the Russians. Right. Yet, partially through a little bit of bad luck and 2 electoral college popular vote splits, the Republican Party looks like it could be on the way to an unpleasant distinction if President Trump, in fact, loses the popular vote in 2020, and that seems very likely.
It does.
It will be the first time since the founding of the Democratic Party in 1828 that either the Democratic or Republican parties lost a popular vote this many times in a span of 8 elections. That'll be like 7 out of 8, because in 2004, Bush beat Kerry in the popular vote, but he didn't beat Gore in the popular vote in 2000. Right. Obviously, we don't know what the November result will be. There's still a little over 2 months to go, and things can change because you always have to say that. Yeah. Things can change. But if things go the way they are right now, with an incredibly steady for 3.5 year, polling average, Trump will lose the popular vote.
Okay.
The question is by how much, because that's going to determine the electoral college.
A lot, I hope. But yes.
But these are state elections. Yeah, but they're incredibly correlated. Yeah. You don't have a situation where Biden wins the popular vote by 14, but somehow loses the Electoral College. It doesn't happen.
Okay. Well, then don't look for it to happen. But yeah, excellent point. I think I did see our friend Dana Hool making the same point over the weekend. Just, from a different
That's
angle.
why he's our friend.
Yeah, that's
What did he say?
exactly right. And if I can, I don't know if I can come up with the tweet right off the top of my head, but it was basically, he was saying, looking forward to, winning another popular vote, and after winning 7 out of the last 8 election popular votes, only to be so that early next year, we can be told that Democrats don't know how to win elections.
Yeah. Exactly.
The old critique.
Let's see if there's anything else that we really want to highlight. That's basically, I think, the big stuff. That's as much as I can get in about what really happened over the weekend.
Okay. I think that's a fair amount of it. Another thing that did happen over the weekend, apparently they... maybe QAnon, maybe not QAnon, I don't know. Marches all over the country of, minor scales, but demonstrations everywhere. The QAnon conspiracy emerging from the shadows to bring in like mommy board posters and wellness forum adherents under the guise of save the children or save our children, the ones that are kidnapped and being held in a non-existent basement in the pizza place. They've found a way to latch on to like mainstream-ish disaffected weirdo people.
I do have to add something about the GOP
kids.
convention.
All right.
Again, keep this in mind. It's not a prediction because we don't know what will happen, but you do remember what happened with the Tulsa rally?
Yes.
And you do remember that in Sturgis, South Dakota, people met for the motorcycle thing and then brought coronavirus back to Minnesota and other places?
Uh-huh. Yes.
That is starting to happen. Monica Alba writes, per poolers in the room.
All right.
In Charlotte.
Oh,
Not everyone is wearing masks. Each attendee was told to acquire a negative test before coming to Charlotte, and each received a test from community health partners upon arrival. There's about 336 delegates and 60 RNC staffers.
Mm-hmm. It's a funny way of putting it. Acquire a negative test. Doesn't matter if
what
it's
happens
yours,
if in 3 weeks people start testing positive?
Then they will start going to the hospital.
It's before the election.
Yes.
It's not a very good, shall we say, optic.
Fake news or
right.
Go
The
away
Democrats
or...
said one thing and had a virtual convention. The Republicans, on the other hand, got everybody together. A lot of them weren't wearing masks. Some of them got sick.
Mm-hmm. I guess they figured Louis
mean?
Gohmert's still alive, so I'm probably not as dumb as him. Maybe I'll live. I don't know. I'm not certain what the thinking is, except,
I'm just saying, I'm just setting the table here. We'll see what happens.
I guess we will, and we'll have to wait a little while to find out, but not too long. Yeah, I think the window kind of expands a little bit. The 2-week window seems a little too short for
no, 3 weeks.
What's
3
really
weeks
happening.
Is the window, not 2.
Okay, we've moved to 3. Good. All right. Well, that's a lot better. And, I think it was about 6 weeks before you would start to see people in the hospitalized and dying. So,
right.
It took Herman Cain 40 days.
Something like that. So, it's an interesting thing. If you look around the country and you look and see some of the hot spots, Texas and Arizona, for example, do seem to be doing a little bit better. Texas, of course, is about to get slammed. Florida, still having issues.
Yeah.
The numbers that people are reporting now are more suspect than ever because I don't know if you heard, but the CDC was told not to get numbers on hospitalizations. It was going to go to this Trump-invented company that was going to do it for them, to HHS. That didn't work. Yeah. Now they've handed getting the numbers back to CDC.
Right.
And CDC is very slow at processing them. So we're flying blind a little bit about hospitalizations. The positive percentage of tests appears to be going down in some of the hot areas, but there's other areas around the country where it's still going up.
Yep.
And so it's still a bit of a mixed picture, which is exactly what we're going to have for months. And you still, just to drive the point home, are reading about stories about colleges having, and that's a whole other discussion, having opened and then having kids come in and then they're positive and then they have to close and then the college blames the kids.
Right.
And what kind of a business model is this? And should we be paying the same amount of money for a whole lot less education because we're not doing in person? Now we're all doing, some sort of hybrid or online version. And is that worth the same thing? So it's a mess. And that's a mess that's not going to be straightened out before November. So again, those people who have already decided to vote for Trump, that's not going to change their mind. Mm-hmm. What the question on the table is going to be is all of this chaos going to convince people who didn't vote in 2016 to get off the sidelines and vote again. I talked to you about this last week. My contention is the main thrust of the 2020 Democratic Convention was to convince 2016 voters who sat on the sidelines to not do that this year.
Yeah.
And so is all the chaos enough to get them out and say, oh, my gosh, it's not getting better. I really have to go out and vote this year.
Yeah. As you were describing it, I began to think it's going to be real interesting, and the statisticians should be real busy for most of the beginning of next year. The results of this election are going to be incredible anyway and difficult to tabulate and figure out exactly what's going on. I'm curious about the effect of emptying the college towns and dispersing those bored, angry voters back home. And I don't know whether their impact would be diluted by sending them home, or will places that aren't ordinarily Democratic strongholds somehow become competitive or become Democratic strongholds? Will Democratic strongholds in the college towns see their votes diminished, or are they firmly ensconced in cities that are Democratic strongholds without the student vote anyway?
I don't know. Well, speaking of statisticians, here's my dad joke for the day, but It wasn't really me who made it. I just observed it. So this guy was on Twitter talking about how, if you just divide and add up the number of deaths and this and that, and here's how I can predict what's going to happen.
Oh, okay.
And a guy came on and answered, said, no, you really can't use the numbers that way. And the first guy said, well, who are you to tell me that? And the second guy said, well, I'm an actuary.
Okay.
And the first guy said, oh, my God, somebody actuaried me.
Pretty good.
Everybody's the amateur epidemiologist these days.
Sure, why not?
And is looking at the numbers and trying to figure out what they mean, and everybody's doing it, and you can't stop it. Mm-hmm. And so everybody's going to be doing their own, I'm looking at the numbers, this is what it means, at home.
I'm doing it. Why not? I mean, I don't know what it means, but I am saying I'm looking at the numbers, and here are the numbers.
Right.
That's about as far as I can take it, and I can say, well, if the numbers,
actuary.
Yeah, all right. Well, actuary, if the numbers stay more or less the same, and they have for a long time, as they have in the polling, you're going to see XYZ happening about this date, which, I figured out. Based on that, and based on the way we've been accruing cases, I think, and deaths, I would be fairly confident about pegging the 200,000 death mark on or about, if you had to pick a date out of the calendar, that you didn't want it associated with, it would probably be September 11th. And that's about where the timeline falls for the accrual of the next 20,000 or so deaths. It goes pretty quickly, but it takes about 10 days to turn over the numbers, and that's just been the pattern. So okay,
September 11th, Well, actuarially, I see what you did there.
Yeah. So we may miss by a day or two, and of course people have different estimations about when you hit the 200,000. But the Worldometer's numbers are the ones I've started with, and that's what I'm sticking with. They tend to run a little bit ahead of some of the other estimates, but it's going to be right around then.
Right.
So tough. Gonna be tough.
Anyway, that's my segment for today. Trying to make order out of chaos, because the weekend summaries on Monday morning are just so chaotic.
Yeah. All right. Well,
time to watch some hearings.
Oh, yes, right. Oh, no wonder. All right. And all right. Well, everybody will be doing that. Text me if something happens.
Yeah. Take care, and I'll talk to you on Wednesday.
Very good. Thanks, Greg. Thanks for catching us up. I don't even know where to start with diving into the rest of things. Pocket, certainly. and the Twitter feed, and then we'll take a 1 minute break to try and regroup on these things. Yeah, the coronavirus hotspots are more or less as mentioned. Florida continues to sort of almost lead the pack. They are they sit currently in third. I hate to talk about it in terms of places, but in third place in terms of total cases so far, with the total sitting at just over 600,000. The third state in the United States to log over 600,000 cases. Texas sitting at just over 604,000 cases. So sort of, still ahead of them. But I imagine that reporting and counting will slow down a little bit during the dual hurricane walloping that they may be in for. So that may be the opportunity for Florida to surpass them. California sitting way out in front, really, 670,000, but of course a much larger population. And as is always the case, people will say, well, what about the per capita or otherwise normalized count? In the normalized count, as Worldometers does it by 1 million, per 1 million in population, Florida sits pretty solidly in second place, with, actually just edging out Arizona, both of which sit in the 27,000 cases per million range. Louisiana, the quiet leader in all of this, with 30,748 cases per million, which, by the way, just by the trick of the numbers, does everybody know this? I mean, mathematicians and other math-inclined people will probably see it right off the top of their head. They say, duh, of course this is the case. But if you are trying to put it in a more relatable term, 30,748 cases per million, if you just do the math there, basically that's 3%, 3.07%, as a matter of fact, of the entire population of Louisiana has been diagnosed with coronavirus. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Does everybody get what I meant in terms of the math there? I guess maybe we'll walk through it just a little more thoroughly. So Louisiana, for instance, just to take that as the example, 30,748 total cases per million, which of course, per million, I mean divided by a million. So basically, if you just take that 30,748 and divide it by 1 million, it will be expressed for you in decimal percentage terms. In other words, if you were trying to figure out what percent of something, how do I even put this mathematically? Anyway, 30,748 divided by a million is 0.030748. You recognize that pattern? 30748, that's 30,748 divided by a million. 0.03 is 3/100ths, which of course is the same as 3%. When you express it in terms of a percentage, we knock the decimal place over 2 places to the right, and this would be 3.0748% of the population testing positive at some point anyway for the coronavirus. That's not how many active cases they have. And that's another interesting way of looking at things, and we haven't really spent much time talking about who has the most active cases at the moment. But you get that, and you see sometimes when I tweet out those charts, for instance, saying, all right, Louisiana has 30,748 cases per million. Easy way, without actually doing the math, is if you just knock that decimal place, or basically if you take the comma in the number and pretend that's a decimal point and move it over one place to the left, you'll get 3.0748% of the population. The same thing for Florida. Florida has 27,962 cases per million. That is, take the comma in 27,962, turn it into a decimal point, move it over one place to the left, 2.7962% of Florida currently has at some point in this pandemic tested positive and been reported as being infected with COVID-19. You get the idea? All right, so just to kind of put those things in context so that when you see at the end of the day when I'm tweeting out all of those stupid lists about things and you see, for instance, well, what's happening over in Qatar. I never did learn no one has ever corrected my pronunciation of Qatar, Qatar, where they have in excess of 40,000 cases per million at this point. That will tell you, of course, that they are, in fact, over 41,000, that they are over 4% of their population having been infected at some point. Where are they now? 41,672 per million, or 4.1672%. It's getting pretty crazy out there around the world. So anyway, here in the United States, Louisiana, Florida, Mississippi, Georgia, now the top 5 in terms of cases per million. The deaths story still remains the story of the first round, if not wave, of the coronavirus pandemic in the United States. New Jersey, New York, Massachusetts, Connecticut. But Louisiana has crept up there. They were an early participant in the first wave because of the Mardi Gras celebration. And they've never been able to shake that. But for all the people who are still defending Florida and asking, where are the deaths? The answer is, yeah, actually, reported deaths are lagging in Florida still. They fall just below, they fall below the average in the United States because those numbers are so heavily boosted up at the top by New York and New Jersey, which lost so many people all at once. But just below the average deaths per million for the entire country fall South Carolina, Georgia, and then Florida. And they've been creeping up slowly but surely. And I guess they'll continue to do so. So we'll keep an eye on them. Also, I threw out my own stat the other day as I was reporting the number of new cases on a daily basis by state. There were a number of people who were upset by that reporting and said, well, what we really ought to do is report it in some normalized way. What about new cases per million per day, which is a stat that's not immediately available on Worldometers, but you can do the math yourself and take the new cases per day and divide it by the number of millions who live in that particular state. It's just kind of a pain in the butt. If you are big into spreadsheets, you can make it automatic. If you know how to scrape the data off of the page from Worldometers, even better. Not my thing, not something I'm aware of how to do. Probably real easy for some of you. Maybe you could simplify my evenings for me by figuring that out. Just scrape the data off of the United States' page for that. And as a matter of fact, it would be a great piece of data to have for the other countries around the world too. New cases, normalized by population. Deaths, same thing, might be helpful. Anyway, but I got some complaints about that, so I started to do the math, and then I got some complaints that I had done the math, but they hadn't read my having done the math, so that one I really can't help you with. But that was an interesting way to spend the weekend too. But normalized, it is a different list. As I told you, let's see, yesterday's, I'll just run through it just for the heck of it. The new cases by state puts, the big states with the large populations, understandably, at the top. California is still the leader in number of new cases because they have far and away the largest population. Then Texas, Florida, Illinois, by the way, creeping back up into the rankings. They had dropped out for a while, and so there must be something going on somewhere. Where I'm not sure, whether it's Chicago or elsewhere. I couldn't tell you. Worldometers probably could if you clicked on it. Some of the states then detail their information by county or by region, but not all states do it, and I don't think Illinois has been doing it, so I have no answer for you there. But that's your top 10. California, Texas, Florida, New York, Georgia, Illinois, at number 6. Arizona, New Jersey, North Carolina. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. We've, I guess, I jumped back in and out, and we've reverted back to total cases. So new cases on a daily basis was California, Texas, Florida, Illinois at number 4. There we are. Tennessee, Georgia, Louisiana, North Carolina, Virginia, Michigan, by the way, also bumping its way back up into the top 10 and has appeared a couple times in the last few days. Normalized by population, it is a different picture. And let's see if I can't find that quickly. Yes, here we go. Top 10, at least from yesterday, state reports of new cases per million. That list goes like this. Tennessee, Louisiana, Mississippi, North Dakota, Iowa, Nevada, Hawaii, surprisingly making an appearance in the last couple of days, Georgia, South Dakota, and then again, Illinois, which is not usually on this list. I have been keeping that stat for a very long time. It's a little bit unstable and changes a lot because, you know, a daily count of new cases is kind of an iffy thing, and some states don't report as evenly every day, so it changes a lot. But overall, there's a pattern that can be discerned from that. For instance, the day before read Alabama, North Dakota, Mississippi, South Dakota, Georgia, Iowa, Missouri, Oklahoma, Nevada, Florida. So like I said, it's not the most stable thing in the world, but you do sometimes see patterns. Boy, can't get rid of this one. 3 days ago, August 21st, North Dakota led the list. North Dakota, Kansas, Arkansas, Mississippi, Nevada, Oklahoma, Georgia, Tennessee, Iowa, Missouri. All right. So again, difficult to track every single state and how they're doing, but you get the idea. Something's going on in North Dakota. Of course, it borders South Dakota, where the Sturgis rally was, although I'm not certain of the geography of where Sturgis lies in the state and how many people might have made the trip there from North Dakota versus other places around the world or around the country. If you're coming from around the world, good luck riding your motorcycle through the ocean, I guess. That's Canadians can do it, but do they is the question. But North Dakota has been kind of sitting up there on the list for some time, and I don't think there's been a great deal of attention on it. And that's the point of a list like this. You know, you might be able to identify places that you might not otherwise have guessed were hot spots. And if you were a competent administration, you might do something about that. But screw all of that. Speaking at the convention, as a matter of fact, one of the key speakers listed, I think even in that group of the first 12 and reappearing on the full 4-night schedule, Governor Kristi Noem of South Dakota, of course, in Trump's mind, the key to getting himself onto Mount Rushmore. So I guess this is another bid for Mount Rushmore immortality. We'll see whether it works for him. Okay, let's see. Back into the other things going on in Pocket and over the weekend documented on Twitter. There's just so many other stories to get to. Let's go looking for some of the bigger things to get to. Let's see. Oh, I mentioned, of course, the ridiculous police shooting up at the top of the show. We just wanted to kind of get it in the record. And, of course, an important part of getting it in the record is to mention the name of the victim of this shooting. And as I understand it, I mean, he was shot 7 times, pretty much point blank, in the back, which is what made it. The whole situation was just insane, as it usually is. Jacob Blake is the name of the person who was shot here. And thankfully, for the moment, still alive, but in serious condition, obviously. So this might be, this could be a real interesting one. The fact that he's so far survived the shooting and hopefully will, to bear living witness to his own ridiculous, crazy, unwarranted police shooting, could add another twist to this ongoing situation. But demonstrations all over the place, in beginning in Kenosha and then spreading elsewhere as they did last time, and as I assume, and I guess I except for the unrest and the disturbance, I hope certainly that the spirit of this protest continues as long as this continues to be a problem, although I would hope that the problem might end at some point. That doesn't appear to be in the offing. If you haven't seen the video and you can stomach seeing such things, I guess, well, you'll see it eventually. You'll see it soon, perhaps on Twitter. I was going to say, I'm not certain I really would say I recommend seeing it, but it's another absurd one, and another one that conservatives will no doubt latch onto to say, well, if you just follow instructions that the police give you, you won't get into these problems. And I can kind of see where I guess from observing these things enough time, I can see where police and police defenders will point to try and justify the shooting there. Apparently, Blake is there. The story per his family is that there was a fight going on. It might have been a domestic disturbance, and Jacob Blake has inserted himself to try to break up the fight. Which, again, the lesson is don't ever try to do a good deed because the police will shoot you once they get there. And, the police arrive, and I guess they have no idea who's doing what. And I assume that even though the family was there to try and explain it to them, well, cops don't listen very often. And, of course, they're also used to hearing stories of what happened told to them by interested parties that maybe turn out not to be true. For whatever reason, they believe that he's a party to this fight, and I guess they're ordering him to stop and allow himself to be unfairly arrested, and who knows what happened to him while he's in their custody. And I can absolutely understand why you would think this is ridiculous. There's no reason in the world to be arresting me. But again, the cops come in blind to these things and mostly stay willfully blind to these things. And they're following him as he walks around what I guess is his car to go and get in. And I guess it looks like, for all the world, like he's going to get in the car and leave in frustration because he knows he shouldn't be the one being arrested here. And yet that's what was happening. The cops have no idea what's going on, and they see him going to get into his car and disobeying their orders. And as he's climbing into the car, they shoot him. My assumption is that the police claim will be, well, who knows what he had in the car? We thought he was going for a gun in the car to come out and shoot us because he was so violent toward us a moment ago, which is to say he wasn't violent towards them at all. There's no evidence of any sort of confrontation other than the fact that he disagrees with the idea that he's the one that ought to be arrested in all this. But I mean, I've seen that so often. Or how many years ago was it? I guess it's probably going on like 4 or 5 years ago. One of the stories that actually made it into the gun fail roundups was a guy who even when they ask you to get your ID, if your ID is in the car and you go to get it and you're black, they figure, oh, he's not going to get the ID I asked him to get. He's going to get the gun I told him not to get or wished he wouldn't get. So I better shoot him and find out later whether that was an ID or a gun. And I'm just also comparing that mentally to the number of videos I've seen of, get out of the car or stop, you're under arrest, with a drunk white person who then gets in the car and drives away. And the cops jump out of the way and a shot's never fired. And I just... well, you know the story. I don't have to tell you about it. But I just wanted to at least put the name on the record, put the story on the record. We'll all be watching to see what happens, and hoping that Jacob Blake pulls through and can be a powerful witness to his own victimization by the police. And it might be a powerful thing to have somebody available who can speak to that, and we'll see where it goes. But all right, it happened. It's out there. Better sources than me for following that news. Just wanted to let you know about that. I mentioned to you also that there was a weird phenomenon of QAnon adjacent or even sometimes direct QAnon rallies, marches of sorts happening all over the country. Will Bunch picked up on this and wrote for the Philly Inquirer about it. And he tweets about it this way. An alarming thing just happened. QAnon-led rallies across America got, this is just what you want here, mainstream news coverage, positive mainstream news coverage, and on TV and in the papers. A dangerous pro-Trump conspiracy theory is expanding. It could sway the election for Trump or become a Biden resistance in 2021. And he writes a column about it, and here it is, and why not share it? Just by way of getting a catch-up on the news, the fact that happened, and a good perspective on what it may mean. QAnon giving America a scary look at what Biden resistance would look like in 2021, writes Will Bunch. It took up 30 seconds Saturday night on the nightly news in Scranton. Footage of maybe 20 to 30 white women, the kind our president likes to call suburban housewives, and their kids marching through a park in the Wayne County, Pennsylvania seat of Honesdale, carrying signs such as "Keep our children safe from pedos." The WNEP-TV anchorwoman, speaking to a region of northeast Pennsylvania that was so critical for President Trump's 2016 victory, reported in her tone of TV authority on their march, quote, "to bring awareness around human trafficking," which is an awkward sentence, but I think probably got the point across. There were more than 200 of these so-called Freedom for the Children rallies across America, and a Sunday morning tour of Google shows the events garnered favorable, unquestioning coverage in Maine, Oklahoma City, Illinois, and elsewhere, often with a link to the organizers' websites so the public could learn more. What TV viewers and local news readers didn't learn is that the Freedom for the Children rallies were tightly interwoven with the bat guano crazy conspiracy theory called QAnon, which posits, among other things, that top Democrats, you know the story, and government officials are part of a massive child sex ring that Trump is on a divine mission to destroy. I told my kids the story of QAnon and what it was last night at dinner. They are nearly 20 and 15, and they're extremely online kids, though social media isn't necessarily where they spend their time. But the meme world is intimately familiar to them, and they were astonished. They had, thank God, they had never heard of this stuff, but they had heard of 4chan and their, S posters. It sounds so dumb and ancient, old fuddy-duddy to not just say the word. I don't know why I restrict myself, but hey, I thought for sure, by the way, they would be rolling their eyes and groaning like, "Oh God, Dad, is Dad heard of 4chan? It's all over now." Anyway, yeah, but they recognized the kind of activity that we're talking about. That is making up complete garbage and as a pastime to see how many stupid people could be fooled by it. And then we're astonished to find out, millions of people are actually dedicating their lives to this thing and maybe even attempting to pull off terrorist attacks in the name of freedom for the children. This is outrageous. Well, anyway, I'll continue with Will Bunch's column instead of my own little anecdote here. Small city TV news producers weren't the only ones arguably fooled by the Freedom for the Children crusade, part of a larger phenomenon of internet conspiracy theorists stealing the oxygen from established groups that have been doing the hard work of fighting actual self-trafficking for decades. In Utah, the state's Republican Attorney General has been promoting Salt Lake City's rally for days, only pulling the plug when alerted by NBC News report that the event planners were deeply involved in the QAnon theory. The truth was out there, and not difficult to find for enterprising journalists aware of the political fear-mongering simmering below the surface of Freedom for the Children. In front of the In-N-Out Burger on Sunset Boulevard, maybe not the best location for that, on Hollywood, really, there's a million reasons why that's wrong. 47-year-old rally goer Kristen Cummings, okay, is this like a Matrix glitch from Oliver Willis here, but told the Huffington Post that QAnon is about the restoration of America. I love the hope and perspective it offers. I mean, it's a sicko conspiracy theory. It's crazy. People who adhere to it belong in mental institutions. But this is the coverage. I love them. I love the hope and perspective it offers. A 15-year-old who only gave her name as, are you kidding me? ISIS? I give up. All right. I mean, obviously, I don't know. Maybe it's real. A 15-year-old who only gave her name as ISIS, poor girl if it's true, even closer to the core of QAnon, got even closer to the core of QAnon when she said, the government keeps secrets from us, which, arguably, sure, why not? And that the source of her political beliefs is watching politicians on TV making weird moves on children. Okay, very unusual. Let's see. Look, a Jay Rosen tweet is embedded in all of this saying, here's an example of local TV, again, the Scranton, PA channel, getting duped into covering a QAnon event as Just Folks, a Just Folks demonstration against human trafficking. These events happened all over the country. The QAnon surge, coincidentally or not, came hours before a Republican National Convention that, avoided by most GOP stalwarts, including its surviving ex-president, is desperately seeking to make a public case for a Trump second term. But in the end, whatever electronic wizardry is generated at the mostly virtual confab by former producers of Trump's fake reality show, The Apprentice. Oh, keep that in mind, right? Mark Burnett is bringing his production team in for this, so it might just work. Well, it may not matter as much as the fever dreams of QAnon and their like-minded conspiracists. If Trump wins, or more likely, moves to claim victory in November, an outcome not to be dismissed, even after 175, now 180,000 COVID deaths, these true believers in a uniquely American brand of baloney will be the difference makers. It speaks to the American moment that you can't write about QAnon without trying, with great difficulty, to even explain what the theory is to the at least 65 million and hopefully more Americans who remain vaccinated against such viral nonsense. But sigh, here we go. In November 2017, an anonymous post from Q, claiming to be a government insider, but almost surely not, entitled The Calm Before the Storm, appeared on the popular conspiracy website, and that's not even really a good description of what it is, 4chan, to reveal that Trump had been sent to break up a deep state cabal that includes rings of pedophiles at the highest levels of Hollywood and the Democratic Party, of course, because why not? Spread by the nonstop wildfires of the World Wide Web in a sea of Q t-shirts and flags at Trump rallies before the coronavirus shut those things down, QAnon has B-list celebrity boosters like ex-Philly, of course he's writing from Philadelphia, Kurt Schilling, and Roseanne Barr. Bizarre offshoots like the non-existent Pizzagate sex ring in the basement of a D.C. eatery, or the notion that John F. Kennedy Jr. faked his 1999 death to become Q. That's who Q is. The not dead John F. Kennedy Jr. And a growing network of supportive sites on Facebook and elsewhere. The wacko theory has clearly become a security blanket, allowing susceptible Americans to see Trump not as a corrupt, dishonest bumbler, but as a hero defending the threats to both their economic underpinnings and the white supremacy of the Caucasian working class. This summer, and of course if that's somehow distasteful to you, you just see it as saving the children, which is unassailably a good thing to do, right? This summer, the national risk from this insanity has escalated on two fronts. First, QAnon has moved with remarkable speed to integrate itself into the mainstream of the already Trump-weakened Republican Party. It's been revealed that the state Republican Party in our second largest state of Texas has adopted a QAnon mantra, that is, "We are the storm," as its new motto, which, by the way, also is very ill-timed as two hurricanes bear down on him. You're the storm? I hate you. In deep red states, QAnon adherents have won several House and Senate Republican primaries. Of course, we discussed this the other day. In Georgia, conspiracy backer Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's called Trump a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to take this global cabal of Satan-worshipping pedophiles out, is on a clear path to Congress in January. Trump, not surprisingly, won't denounce this base of supporters and instead poured gasoline on the wildfire by telling a questioner that, "I've heard these are people that love our country." Yeah, well, okay, sure. Anyway, I guess that's kind of where we stand on this thing. We got our break coming up. I'll scan this and see whether it's worth continuing on. It's always worth reading Will Bunch, but we've got much to get to. We'll see what we get to next. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday, but our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to Patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. I guess we'll continue on with Will because he gets on to another interesting point and pivots at this point, although, hey, where did my... Here we go. Back to the Philly Inquirer. The second front opened by QAnon is arguably more alarming. I read that and said, all right, well, if it's more alarming, we'll continue on and read it. Infiltrating or co-opting long-standing movements against the actual the actual sex trafficking, not self-trafficking. That might be okay. Sex trafficking that regrettably exists in modern society. The New York Times recently reported that QAnon followers have hijacked the well-established Save the Children hashtag, jammed up child abuse hotlines, and made any news article about real sex trafficking cases, albeit not involving top Democrats or movie stars, go viral on Facebook, which is not by itself a bad thing, but okay. Saturday's Freedom for the Children rallies, covered so credulously by so many news outlets, marked a great leap forward in this crusade to make QAnon look respectable and gain thousands of new followers. Why does this matter? For one thing, the more folks who believe that pedophiles are secretly running America and that no one is stopping them, the more likely that the most unhinged followers will resort to violence. We've already seen that QAnon followers have committed a couple of murders, including, bizarrely, a New York mob boss. You all remember that one? That some unknown kid showed up and killed a mob boss and said it was a QAnon assignment. It was the most amazing, crazy thing you ever heard. And they've also blockaded roads around the Hoover Dam while threatening to take out Joe Biden. The FBI has already called the group's adherents a potential terrorist threat, and that will only get worse, especially if Biden wins. And again, I bring you back to my own thinking about what if adherents to this potential terrorist threat ended up with pins identifying them as members of Congress so that they could move freely about the Capitol complex and bypass security, as is apparently going to happen for Marjorie Taylor Greene. What will be in her purse when she wades into the crowd on the floor that she believes, on the House floor, on which she believes the majority of people there are in fact satanic, child-torturing pedophiles? Will she be true to her ideology? Will she suppress it for fear of being arrested when the moment to act finally comes? I don't know. You have to decide how balanced and prudent you think she really is, given that she's a QAnon adherent. But even without bloodshed, Will continues, QAnon is poised to wreak political havoc With a life-or-death election little more than 2 months away, the dingbat theory will function as a political blindfold that will allow Trump voters across the Rust Belt to not see the rising coronavirus death toll, double-digit unemployment, and rising homelessness and food insecurity. You can surely see why Trump would give QAnon his blessing. And also illustrated here by another, I guess, credulous bit of coverage of these rallies in tweet form here. But continuing with the article, what if Biden is able to circumnavigate the sabotage of the Postal Service, the Russian interference, and whatever Lukashenko-style moves Trump is plotting for November 4th and beyond, and becomes the 46th president in January? Yes, we haven't gotten to the situation in Belarus yet either. Wow. Anyway, QAnon is giving us a sneak peek into what the Biden resistance, or Tea Party 2.0, will look like if a Democratic government attempts the massive New Deal-style reforms that will be called for in 2021. The thousands of new members getting sucked into QAnon through Saturday's Freedom for the Children rallies or the hijacked Save the Children hashtag will be a ready-made army to march against what they'll brand as tyranny, like a national mask mandate or other public health measures, or, if a vaccine can be safely rolled out, lead a new and even more dangerous anti-vax movement. Like the Tea Party before it, QAnon stands poised to march, overrun town meetings, and get out the 2022 vote to thwart any meaningful action on climate change, on structural racism and sexism, and economic inequality in America. And one last thing about QAnon. It's also here to remind all the back-to-brunch voters that simply replacing the Trump narcissism with an empathetic Biden isn't the end of our long national nightmare, but merely the first step in a longer journey. The wars pitting reason against irrationality, science against ignorance, truth against dishonesty, and decency against fear-mongering will take years to fight. And America's survival depends on whether the truth can win this time. Very dramatic, but very true, I think. And also, I'll remind you, why not take the opportunity? Lots of people discussing the, everyone's a little wary of what's going to come after Trump, even if Biden wins. Just on the coronavirus front alone, I guess I would say, there's no reason whatsoever to believe that removing Trump from the White House by itself necessarily removes him from the political scene. I don't know how much influence he retains when he's not president, but it's entirely possible that he could join in on this and lead what ends up being some sort of Biden resistance and continues effing up our response to coronavirus and everything else from the outside. The way I see it, we don't get out of this thing reliably out from underneath the threat of the coronavirus while Trump is alive and has access to social media. I mean, he just has to be finished forever before, and someone else will just step into his place. So it doesn't even necessarily matter that he be removed from the public square, however it happens. But there's no real reason to believe that America just simply regains its senses once Trump is removed from office. It's going to take a lot more than that. This reminded me as I was reading through this. Oh yes, right. About who was being sucked into this thing. Did I put the tweet away or not? That I'm not sure. Might have to scan down, but I did take note of someone tweeting yesterday about the nature of the people who were finding themselves tied up in the QAnon conspiracies these days. Here's NBC News, let's see, reporting about the relationship of QAnon to the Save the Children hashtag and the demonstrations. That's true. But somebody, I'll have to look in Twitter, was tweeting yesterday about the number of people from the mommy blogging scene and wellness groups on Facebook who have moved, as she said, the number of moms she's seen flip from selling essential oils to becoming full-on QAnon adherents in the last 12 months has been incredibly startling for her. And you might wonder what sort of connection there is there. Why would that be the case? And it becomes a little clearer, I guess, if you've ever seen any of this stuff, or like alternative health networks, etc. Here's the tweet. Claire Scattergood Lee is the name of the candidate. Claire Scatter is how you can find her on Twitter. No space there. Retweeting the tweet of Ben Collins here from NBC News. I guess that was why I have his article in pocket here. Major Q influencers are disavowing yesterday's QAnon rallies because they don't understand. This would have been I guess Saturday rallies. They don't understand how unwieldy the movement has become. I'm not sure exactly what he means by that, but these aren't just boomer memes and 4chan, oh, there's our word again, crap, posters anymore. They're moms who were radicalized in wellness Facebook groups they've never even heard of. And Claire comments this, of course. If you aren't in any mom groups, you might think he's exaggerating here. He's actually underselling it. I can't tell you how many moms I know who went from selling essential oils to posting QAnon conspiracies in the past 12 months. It's pretty amazing. And I guess the connection that I think I have in mind anyway is people who are into alternative health things have for many years complained that their various alternative health theories have remained unapproved by the government powers that be, and including the FDA, which they sometimes believe is standing in the way of their alternative medicine in favor of, big pharma or whatever. And we all can find ourselves sympathetic with that. I mean, it's an excellent ploy for support among people who have problems with the big pharmaceutical companies for very different reasons. But at any rate, their alternative health solutions sometimes it's just dangerous quackery, and sometimes it's just harmless stuff, and sometimes it might actually do some good. You can't tell. It depends on what the thing is that you're talking about here. But everybody finds common cause in complaining about the FDA. Now, of course, as an added bonus for some of the people who make the leap over to the QAnon side of things, Trump has done a wonderful job of destroying the FDA such that it can't protect the health and welfare of many, many hundreds of millions of Americans who depend on them. But that might be cheered by people who are angry that they have for years refused to acknowledge the benefits of melting down a bunch of silver and chugging it, or drinking your fish tank to avoid coronavirus, or what have you. But hooray, he's finally undoing this other secret cabal meant to keep us down. There's a very strong anti-government streak among the alternative health folks, and they find it an easy leap then. I mean, I suppose if you can't figure out, well, why is the government always interfering in our thing in favor of big pharma? Well, what if, I don't know. I mean, I don't understand why you wouldn't be convinced money is the answer. I mean, that seems like a pretty good answer to me. Probably the real answer. But I guess if you were really pissed at them, you could also throw in, well, maybe they're also satanic child molesters. Well, I don't really need to go that far in order. But you know what? Tell me more. And I guess that's how it starts. And what can I tell you? I suppose if you're there because you believe crystals will heal you, it's possible to also convince you that the reason the government won't let you say that your crystals cure cancer is they're all satanic pedophiles. Maybe that works for you. I don't know. But it works. It doesn't have to work for everybody. And it can even only work for a tiny slice of the people who are there. But if there are millions and millions to choose from, then you can populate a couple dozen rallies of a couple dozen people, maybe even 100 people at, 20, 40, 50 sites around the country. And if you get positive coverage because you're really all about helping the children, well, it'll only grow from there. Very problematic. All right, other things to bring up for you. Oh, one thing I discovered was interesting over the weekend. We were reading here probably Friday after the show. My wife was reading after she was done opening her Coke can and having oatmeal, as many of you have had fun observing during our pandemic cocooning. She read this story, and I think we're all probably pretty aware of it, part of the post office sabotage about the chicks, the hatchling chickens that have been dying in the mail. And a lot of us were probably startled to discover that apparently it's a very old practice. It goes back over 100 years, but back when the post office was in fact truly reliable, which takes us back to about early this year, as a matter of fact, you could order live chickens, hatchlings, chicks, through the mail. And I guess they don't have any need for additional food or water for the first 3 days or so of life. I'm sure they would prefer to have some, but I guess they don't need it. And the post office has been reliably able to deliver them safely and effectively so that chickens are being mailed all over the country all the time and no problems occurring. With the delays of the mail, of course, you end up with dead chickens in the mail, and it's become a growing problem. If you want a hook for discussing it, I thought this was really interesting. It's not just chickens. I'm sure hatchlings of all sorts get mailed all over the place once you've figured out that you can do that. And yeah, it is an old practice, and farmers and those connected to farmers tell me it's an excellent way to replenish your stock and to give some genetic diversity, even if you have an established flock at your farm. You bring in some literally new blood just to keep the gene pool healthy. But that farmers all over the place were having this problem. But it's not just chickens. There were also hatchling turkeys involved, to no one's surprise. If you can mail a hatchling chicken, you can mail a hatchling turkey. Turkey chicks are called poults, like poultry, right? And apparently they've been turning up dead as well, but there's greater, perhaps, implications, culturally speaking, for all the dead poults. All the dead poults that are being discovered and were reported in this story as having been discovered in the last couple of weeks were presumably, well, at any rate, the timing works out this way. It takes a poult about, it says, 16 to 20 weeks to grow to the size which you might, let's say, vegans and vegetarians, cover your ears, harvest them for Thanksgiving. In other words, America's Thanksgiving turkeys are being killed in the mail thanks to Trump because he wants to be able to screw with the mail enough to prevent you from voting by mail during the pandemic. Now, as if though it wasn't bad enough that Thanksgiving was likely to be canceled anyway. I mean, summer was a lost season as it is, and lots of summer vacations and camps didn't happen, and kids had their problems with school at the beginning of the spring and now going back to school. Yes, but it's going to be a real mess in the fall as we, of course, merge with flu season and have no effective treatment and haven't quashed the spread of the virus by actually being strict about our distancing and our lockdowns. We're already seeing, people are already complaining, well, there's going to be no football. Think about the fall season. Now, no kids not going back to college. There's no football going on. You can't go to the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade and pack the sidewalks anymore. You can't even go have Thanksgiving, you're starting to realize now, with your big extended family because you have to stay separated. But now you can't even stay home, just the 4 or 5 or whatever, 6 of you, or even the neighbors that you've been socializing with, and have a turkey of your own because all the turkeys are dead because they were killed in the mail. It's like Trump is waging his own cultural war against the United States, and nobody notices. It's just, okay. So he's destroying everything he claims to be standing for. But all of this goes down the tubes. You can't have it. If you don't have a Thanksgiving turkey, maybe you have a Christmas turkey. Maybe you get together then. No New Year's Eve in Times Square, that's for sure. You won't be having that either. Everything that we look forward to make it through the bleak months is going to be eliminated by Trump's incompetence and bumbling idiocy. It's, again, one of the major problems of his why don't you just-ism approaches to everything. Why don't you just slow down the mail so that I can win? Well, he probably gave no thought to the fact that chickens and turkeys would be dying all over the place and what that might mean for later. I don't like chicken anyway, but I bet he does like to have a Thanksgiving turkey. He likes that. Or at least he doesn't want to be yelled at by everybody else who doesn't get one. Anyway, that's out there. Just wanted to mention that. Let's see. Other things that really, who knows, in the few minutes we have left, let me head back up to the top of Pocket and see if I can't scroll down and figure out what else to throw out there. Let's see. I guess we got time on Friday to talk about Steve Bannon's arrest. There are more developments in that, of course. But let's leave that for the moment. Maybe here we can drop a mention of what's happening in Belarus. It has lots of interesting parallels to what's going on here in the United States. The would-be dictator, and I guess maybe actual dictator there, Lukashenko. What is his? I don't even know what his first name is. Lukashenko. He, of course, appears to have rigged up his own re-election. And there are massive protests all over the place, and how they can get it done in Europe, right? They can amass these crowds all over the place. Maybe it's even just the design and structure of European cities that sometimes make these crowds look larger than they are, but they are plenty large even without that. Here in the United States, we're just too spread out, and we can't very often produce the same sorts of crowds. But lots of people observing what was going on there and saying, we're going to have to do this. He has essentially he came straight out early on and said, you're not getting rid of me unless you kill me, which, is an interesting invitation. And we've been holding out the Ceausescu example for some time now, and it might be interesting to see that. But he apparently really means it. I did see some video clips from over the weekend of a helicopter arriving at the presidential, I don't know whether it's a presidential palace. That's what we usually end up calling it, even if it isn't a palace. In other countries, we say it's a presidential palace. In ours, we say, it's the White House. It's very nice. It's a presidential palace, too. Anyway, saw the helicopter landing there, and people thought this must be the evacuation, the final escape of Lukashenko. He's taken off and giving up. He sees the writing on the wall. And then it turns out it was, I don't know where he was, but he was elsewhere. This was Lukashenko arriving back at the presidential palace via helicopter and apparently climbing off the helicopter with a rifle in his hands. He's doing the cosplay thing and marching around. Well, who knows? Maybe he's KGB trained and he might really mean it. He's walking around with his security forces armed and in body armor and patrolling the barricades with them. And I guess we may see it come down to, machine guns into the crowds in Belarus. We're a little concerned about that. So we're going to have to keep an eye on what's going on there. And, if they figure out a good way of getting rid of their dictator, maybe we take some notes and think about how we can handle that here in the United States. Let's see. Other things to add to the conversation. Yes, there was the Daily Beast article everyone is talking about. I said I saw it being tweeted around by Noah Shachtman yesterday with the notion that the story about the exploding Russian ventilators was news, that it was, sort of not necessarily just breaking news, but that this was something that they had discovered somehow. And I don't know whether they were trying to insinuate that it had never been reported before. Of course it was. We learned about it back in April and we discussed it on the show. And the weirdness, I guess the new angle on that part of the story is that it was Jared Kushner, they're now saying, who arranged with this his Russian contact for this deal to be made. And Kirill Dmitriev, I'm sure that name has come up a little bit before. He's the head of the Russian Direct Investment Fund. But that it was these two who sealed the deal to get those ventilators shipped. The reasoning behind it remains the same, that it was all about trying to show that Russia was reaching out and becoming, helping the United States, and that there was every reason for there to be closer cooperation and friendship between the two countries, as Trump has always wanted. Why he wants that is, of course, a slightly fuzzier picture, but it's something he's been kind of overt about from the beginning. I say that's a change because when we discussed this in April, I guess before the ventilators were known to be blowing up and killing everybody in the ICU, Trump wanted everyone to know that he had personally negotiated this deal with Putin, and that the fact that these ventilators were showing up was a testimony to his great deal-making skills. Now that it turns out that they were garbage and in fact dangerous, and also, by the way, that they run on 220 volt electricity, not 110 like we have here in the United States, though presumably you could convert the electric input, but maybe that's what was making things blow up. I don't know. But now that these things were death traps, Jared Kushner made the deal, and it wasn't me, and it wasn't Putin, it was Dmitriev instead. So, okay, I found that kind of interesting, and I don't know whether I can go ahead and believe that or not, but that's the reporting. There were a couple of other very interesting elements to that story that come down towards the end. I guess learning more about Dmitriev and all of his efforts to establish some sort of back channel discussions. Again, things that we learned about early on, Kushner wanting a secure back channel way of communicating with the Russians that our intelligence community couldn't track. And that's kind of a weird and suspect sort of thing to do. And a couple other various elements, perhaps we can digest those today off the air and maybe discuss them as they get clarified tomorrow. But a lot of people will be combing through this piece and finding the news bits. It's a rather long one. Let's see, a couple of other interesting items to drop on you. How about this one? We'll end with this and then lament the fact that we weren't able to get to so many other things, but that'll be our Tuesday program. Disturbing news from Yahoo, because that's what they do over at Yahoo. Mary Pappenfuss. Oh, actually a Huffington Post reporter here. So the news being carried by Yahoo News. That's where I found it. President Donald Trump told officials from the Department of Homeland Security, and is that really an important department, right, to get their marching orders by listening to Fox Business host Lou Dobbs, quote, every night. Former DHS Chief of Staff Miles Taylor told Anderson Cooper on Friday. More revelations from Miles Taylor gone rogue. This is an interesting one. Dobbs, an effusive supporter of Trump, was basically the, quote, shadow chief of staff for the department, said Taylor, who actually was the chief of staff for the department. That's disheartening, I'm sure. The president would call us, and he would say, why the hell didn't you watch Lou Dobbs last night? You need to listen to Lou. What Lou says is what I want to do, Taylor said. So, if Lou Dobbs peddled a conspiracy theory on late-night television or made an erroneous claim about what should be done at the border, the president wanted us to be tuning in every night, he added. Taylor said that he didn't have time to watch Dobbs while the 250,000-person DHS was, quote, trying to guard against some of the most severe threats to this country. We can't be watching Lou Dobbs and taking our orders from him, but this happened on a regular basis. Taylor served in the DHS from 2017 to 2019, including as chief of staff to former Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen. He has blasted the Trump administration as endorsing Joe Biden for president. He accused Trump in a blistering Washington Post op-ed of sacrificing national security for his personal benefit. Taylor said earlier this week, last week of course, that Trump once asked if America could swap Puerto Rico for Greenland, and that he frequently made disparaging comments about the Puerto Rican people, and specifically he said, can't we get rid of them because the Puerto Rican people are poor and dirty? Fairly disgusting, but no news, I guess, in that respect. We know that that's what he thinks of these people. Let's see. Trump, of course, has responded to Taylor's criticisms by saying he's a disgruntled employee and a real stiff whom he has never heard of. And then, of course, that was the signal to publish the photos of the two of them there together in the Oval Office. But, of course, Miles Taylor at that point is, I guess, happy enough to be there that he's giving the double thumbs up with Trump in the Oval Office. Maybe he is disgruntled now, but isn't everybody? I don't think there are very many employees left that aren't disgruntled at this point. Just thought that was an interesting part. Lou Dobbs getting the call. Now, when ordinarily people think that it's Sean Hannity that gives all the orders, but when it comes to DHS, I guess it's Lou Dobbs. All right, plenty to catch up on tomorrow. Should be a fun and action-packed show. And, of course, everything will be screwed up. All these plans will be laid to waste when Trump begins speaking tonight at his Doom and Gloom convention. We'll see just how crazy it gets. In the meantime, West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy coming up next with Justice Putnam. What's he got on tap? Let's see. Trump's silence on Navalny emboldens Putin, just like all the other silences. Then on the rest of the menu, deaths from excitable delirium. Let me see if I can figure out what the hell that means after this.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Well, you're just going to have to tune into this one. Excitable delirium after ketamine injections during arrests is drawing new scrutiny. I would have to say, what do you mean ketamine injections during arrests? Well, you can find out if and when you stay tuned. Next, for Justice Putnam, why even say if? We all know it's a when. Be there.